application video is for the second virtual classroom for the MAAF module and covers working capital management, which is included in Unit 7. We need to consider what is included and what is not included in working capital. The answer to this will depend on the definition of working capital that is being used. So for the purposes of this module, we are using the definition of it being inventory and accounts receivable, less accounts payable, as we are focusing on the conversion of debtors and inventory back into cash. Our case study organization is Sugarman. Here's a quick reminder of Sugarman. Now, if you're not familiar with the case study, please pause the video and read through the points in the slide. Also read through the case study for Virtual Classroom 2. So the requirement is for Sugarman's peppermint flavored hard-boiled lollies. We need to calculate inventory days, the EOQ, optimal safety stock, as well as the reorder point. The financial information shown has been extracted from Sugarman's management accounts. You should be familiar with the formula to calculate inventory days. This is assumed knowledge. Using the opening and closing inventory figures in the balance sheet, with the cost of goods sold figure from the case study, we can calculate the inventory days, which are 108.9 days. This is 3.5 months worth of inventory on hand at stores and in the warehouse at the 30th of June. Sugarman considers this level of inventory at this time of year to be reasonable. To answer this question, we need to know firstly how to calculate the economic order quantity. The formula for EOQ is shown on the screen. The components which make up this formula are D, which is demand in units for a specified time period, P is the ordering cost per purchase order, and C is the carrying cost per unit of stock for the specified time period. To be able to answer this question, we're going to need some additional information. Sugarman's 250-gram bags of peppermint flavored hard-boiled lollies are one of its most popular product lines, and demand for it is constant throughout the year. You have collected the following information in relation to this product and inventory management. The retail selling price, excluding GST, is $5.41 per bag, with 2,050 bags sold each week. The lollies are purchased by carton, with a carton containing 24 bags. The standard landed cost in Australia at the Sydney warehouse is $70.80 per carton. We also have information about stock loss, order processing costs, carrying costs, and other lead times. And order lead times. So we can use this information to determine the economic order quantity. We will start by working out each of the components of the formula. Starting with demand, the annual consumption would be 2,050 bags sold per week, multiplied by 52 weeks. There is a wastage factor that also needs to be included, so demand would be 4,464 cartons per year. If we use a demand period other than annual, we would need to ensure that the other factors like expected return are also adjusted to reflect the same time period. Therefore, it is often easier to use annualized demand for EOQ calculations. P, the order processing costs, are given as $10 per order. That leaves C being the carrying cost, which still needs to be calculated. The carrying cost of inventory has two components: the cost invested in the inventory and other carrying costs, which includes the cost of warehousing, which is given as being $2.75. The cost invested in the inventory is calculated as the cost of the inventory multiplied by the expected rate of return. In this case, $70.80 times 10% being $7.08. This represents the required return for holding the inventory. Adding these two amounts together, we have the carrying amount of $9.83. Using each of these figures in the economic order quantity formula, we have a result of 95.3. This is not the final answer for EOQ. The order quantity is based on cartons, and you can't order 0.3 of a carton. But if you round this to the nearest carton, that won't necessarily give the correct answer either. In this case, the closest round number is 95. But when calculating EOQ, you should always round up to the nearest whole number, as if you rounded down, you wouldn't purchase enough units to meet the demand. Therefore, in this case, the answer would be 96 cartons. Moving on, one of the assumptions underlying the EOQ calculation is that the same quantity is reordered at the reorder point. The reorder point is where, given the level of inventory on hand, an order should be placed to replenish the stock. The formula for calculating the reorder point is shown. In this example, we would take the 2,050 bags sold in a week, adjust for the wastage factor, and multiply by the 5 weeks lead time. So for the peppermint boiled lollies, the point at which a new order for 96 cartons would be made is when the stock level reaches 10,302 bags. Note that Sugarman uses bags. That is the unit that customers would be purchasing in. This is different to the stock unit specified by the supplier, which is in cartons. Now, there is a risk that we won't always have enough stock on hand to sell. This is the risk of a stock out. To mitigate this risk, companies often maintain a base level of stock known as safety stock. The following are reasons to hold safety stock: fluctuations or inaccurate forecasting of demand, suppliers not having stock on hand, transportation delays, which would also extend the lead time. All of these are reasons to hold safety stock. Anything that means that the level of demand might not be correct or the lead time might be extended increases the risk of a stock out. The safety stock held to mitigate this risk would then be reflected in the calculation of the reorder point. Whilst there is a cost attached to not having stock on hand to sell, i.e. stock out costs, there's also a cost attached to carrying additional inventory in the form of safety stock. So this is a balancing act, as indicated by the slide. The key to effective managing inventory, and hence working capital, is to determine the optimal level of safety stock to hold so as to minimize the overall cost to the company. So this is the process outlined in the CSG to approach this type of question. We would work through all of the steps as we answer the required to calculate the optimal safety stock for Sugarman's peppermint boiled lollies. Firstly, we will calculate the cost of expected stockouts as specified at specified levels of safety stock. Then we will calculate the cost of carrying safety stock at various levels. Finally, we will add the cost of carrying safety stock to the cost of stockouts at the various levels to determine the optimum level of safety stock. To determine the optimum level of safety stock, we need some additional information. In particular, we need to know the different levels of demand and their probability of occurring. A stockout will occur when demand is greater than the level included in the reorder point calculation. This is because as the number of units sold is greater than that factored into the calculation, a new stock will not have arrived in time to be sold. That was step one. So we will do our calculation based on 3 levels of safety stock. If we held no safety stock, if we held enough safety stock to cover a 10% increase in demand, i.e. 1,031 units, or if we held enough safety stock to cover a 20% increase in demand, which is 2,061 units. This is step 2. We would look at the level of demand over the period of the lead time to determine the demand levels where a stockout will occur. This is the second column shown. The number of units of stockout are shown in the third column, which is calculated as the demand units less the reorder point less safety stock. The probability of demand at each level, as indicated from the background, is included in the fourth column. The cost of the stockouts at each demand level is calculated by multiplying the unit cost of a stockout by the number of units not available for sale. This is step 3. In this case, the cost of a stockout is the lost margin on the sale of a bag of the lollies. The calculation is shown at the top of the screen. The next step is to calculate the expected stockout cost for the year by multiplying the cost we have just calculated by the number of orders and by the probability of a stockout occurring. But how do we calculate the number of orders? This is the demand for the year divided by the economic order quantity we calculated earlier. This is shown at the bottom of the screen. So we have the total cost of stockouts at the various levels of demand. Now we need to calculate the cost of holding safety stock. This was steps 4 to 6. Using the carrying cost calculated earlier in the EOQ question, which was $9.83 a carton, we can then calculate the total cost of carrying safety stock at the various levels. This is done by multiplying the number of units of safety stock held by the carrying cost. But first we need to adjust the carrying cost to be per bag by dividing the per carton rate by the 24 bags in a carton. That completes step 7. In step 8, by adding together the carrying cost and the stock out costs for a specified level of safety stock, the total cost to the business can be seen. So from this analysis, we need to decide what level of safety stock should be held. The costs to Sugarman are minimized to $844 when safety stock of 2,061 bags are held. At lower levels, the cost to the company is higher due to the high cost of lost sales relative to the carrying cost. So this is the optimum level of safety stock. We can now complete the reorder point calculation by including the level of safety stock in the calculation. We add the original reorder point figure of 10,302 plus the safety stock to get a final reorder point of 12,363 bags. We have now answered all components of this question. With the calculations in the last part of the question, you would be asked to show your workings. As we have seen in workings through this video, there are many aspects that need to be considered in your answer, and the examiner would look for these to award marks. Thank you. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion forum of My Learning in the virtual classroom section.